Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me here tonight. So, today we are going to be speaking with Scott Lawlor, but before I bring him into the stream, just a couple things I wanted to say. I am trying out 4K streaming for the first time tonight, so hopefully that goes well on my end, and if you guys are watching, you can give that feature a try if you have a 4K TV or monitor and see if it's working for you. And give me any feedback in chat about how that process is working for you guys, if it does or doesn't, or if there's any additional lag or anything like that. But things look good on my end so far. Also, this is a live interview, so if anybody has any questions or comments that they would like to make, I will relay those over to Scott at an appropriate time. So whenever you think of anything, just go ahead and ask it, and I will relay it to him as needed. So yeah, thank you all for being here, and I will go ahead and bring Scott into the chat now. Hello, Scott Lawlor. How are you doing this evening?
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing very well.
Thank, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the first time that I heard your music was maybe in 2015 or 2016. I think I might have even been writing for Terra Relicta back then still when I first encountered your music. And you, I would say, are one of the most prolific musicians that has come across my radar over the years. You have a lot of albums that you release. Uh, and But I would say that there's some other artists that I know that release like really high numbers of albums, and they don't always resonate with me. But I was just telling somebody either last night or this morning, like, I have a hard time keeping up sometimes, but everything that I've checked out of yours, I always really enjoy it. So
Well, thank you.
whatever that might mean.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny that people mention how prolific I am and how many albums I have on Bandcamp, and yet there are still artists that I know who have maybe even double of what I've got on Bandcamp. So I'm probably not the most prolific artist out there, but I'm probably one of them.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that. That means a lot that you say that my music resonates with you, even though there is a whole lot of it.
Yeah, and because like a lot of times I think it's people that release this much music in these related genres are often it's just very pattern based drone music where there's really they just kind of put out an hour of droning and it's like, well, there's my new album. Or it's a noise ambient where they sort of just get a texture and let that thing play out for like an hour or so, and then again that's it. But you might not have heard, but I was playing one of your tracks, the Pandemic Unfolding track, in our couple of minutes here while we were waiting, and there's a lot of samples in it, and it just feels your music feels very much alive, and it doesn't, each album has its own feel, and there's a lot going on, and it's just not the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I try very intentionally not to do, because I don't like doing the same thing over and over and over. It gets boring,
Yeah.
and it would get boring for the audience too. And so, you know, the main reason I create music, just like most people, is because I enjoy it. And if it's the same thing over and over, how well can you enjoy that, really?
Yeah, exactly. So I guess let's get things started by I like to usually look into the background of an artist at first. So maybe you could speak with us a little bit about, the sort of music that you've enjoyed over the years and what led you to becoming a musician.
Well, I've always been interested in music ever since I was a small child. I was the oddball out in my family. everybody else in my family was into sports, and my dad was a little league coach, and my brothers and sister played baseball, volleyball, football, things like that. And so I was the one who was always playing music. My parents always used to get me instruments when I was a kid. They got me like a toy drum set when I was 6, and a toy organ of some sort when I was like 7. And my mom always tells the story that when I was 2 years old, I completely ruined her Elvis Presley collection by running the needle of the record player over the albums. And she says, "Man, if you hadn't done that, this would be worth a fortune today." And so,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I've just always liked music. My dad used to work for IBM,
Oh, interesting.
and in the late '70s, he would bring home cassettes, and back then the computer programs were done on cassette tapes,
Yeah.
and so he would bring home these cassette tapes, and I would just put them in my tape player and just let them play. And maybe that was like my first introduction to anything that would resemble noise music. But um, I don't know. I've just always liked music. When I was in college, I wanted to be a double major in music and psychology, but I actually ended up majoring in English and psychology because I wanted to be a novelist.
Hmm.
Um, but that didn't work out so well. Although I did have a couple of things published in my college magazine. Had some sort of a poem and a short story published. Um, but when I moved to Ohio to attend graduate school in 1990, I was going to a Catholic grad school called Franciscan University. I went to a music store and got a keyboard, and I just started playing around with it. And a friend of mine actually had to help me figure out all the menus and everything because I'm totally blind, so the couldn't very well see the display. So he helped me memorize what buttons were where and how many clicks it was to get to this menu and that menu. And so I just started creating music and discovered that I really put sounds together much better than words. So I just started playing um, around different places. I moved from Steubenville to Akron in 1991 after I dropped out of grad school. And I just started playing around at different coffee houses and restaurants in the Akron area until around 1997, I think it was. And then I took a break from music for a long time and didn't really pick it up again until 2012. So I've just always had an interest in music and listening to music and everything else.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That is a pretty big gap there in between. So out
Yeah.
of curiosity, did you just like the idea of writing novels, or was there like a specific style or theme that you were being drawn toward with that idea?
That was so long ago, I don't really remember, but I remember the one problem that I had with writing was I wasn't very good with character development.
Hmm.
And in terms of setting scenes and stuff, I just didn't feel like I had the imagination to do all that very well. So I don't usually do a lot of writing. Although on my albums, I write liner notes and I try to put a lot of intentionality in what I say about my music because back when I was a kid, I would go to the record stores, and you could read the liner notes of the albums, especially at the used record stores and stuff like that. And so I put my albums on Bandcamp, and I like to have a little blurb about what the album is about so that people have an idea of what they're going to be getting. Because I think to myself, well, if somebody puts an album up there and there's nothing to explain anything about it, I'm not as likely to buy it or engage with it as I am if there's some sort of um, if there's some sort of written liner notes from the artist about the music,
Yeah, that
if
makes a
that
lot of
makes sense.
sense to me. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially, as a person in my position that, people send me music constantly to review or just to give it a listen and tell them what I think or whatever the case may be. And
Mm.
especially with ambient, dark ambient, drone, all these different sorts of genres that are all, very subtle. If you don't have some element of direction from, something that's giving you a narrative, whether it's in writing or just extremely descriptive album cover art or something like that, I often just don't know where to take a thing. It's like, what do I do with this? Somebody will send something to me and it's like obscure track titles and no album description and obscure photography for the cover art. And I'm like, what would I ever say about this? Like, I just think like, oh, that's cool. And that's it. So,
Yeah.
as opposed to, like you're talking, and I would say as an example something like Simon Heath's Sabled Sun project is a potent example of the exact opposite of that, where from the cover art to the track titles to the album descriptions, there's just, something just all down the line. There's just a million things happening to draw you into the narrative of what's going on with the music. So yeah, I definitely I very much appreciate that you do that. And
Yeah. And as an artist, we have a responsibility to guide the imagination of the listener as well as allow them to take their own journey. And sometimes that can be a hard balance to achieve.
yeah, and I'm just realizing that now this is somewhere that Spotify really falls short, because there's
Hmm.
really no way to get an album description off of Spotify. They have an artist bio that they have on there now, at least, but when you click on an album, you just get the songs. You don't get any of the words, and the words are often very important. So
Yep.
yeah, that's probably something that, but I'm sure they're making enough money that they don't care. uh,
Yeah. Yeah. They're making a ton of money. Their profits went up last year, I'm sure.
oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, well, and I
Yep.
don't want to get into this can of worms, but I've seen some people
Nope.
that I follow around Facebook talked about some really bad practices that Spotify is engaging in as a corporation that should be leading us into different alternative places to find our music and entertainment at. Real quick here,
Yeah.
Ronnie, thank you very much for joining us. Ronnie Ringman says, hi, Scott and Michael. Johan, thanks for joining. Desiderio Marginus says, good evening. Wannabe 98 is a first time chatter. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. He says, finally, I catch one of your streams. Oh, it's Scott. Hey, Scott. And Insectarium, how are you doing tonight? He says, hey, Scott. So thank you guys all for joining us. And like I said, if you have questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat and I will ask Scott. Um, what I was reading, as sort of a refresher to get me ready for today, I was reading the interview that you did with Rich about a year and a half, 2 years ago for This Is Darkness.
Uh-huh.
The other contributor to my website interviewed Scott. For you guys that don't know what I'm talking about right now, they did a written interview. So you sort of were going into some background on different ambient music that you liked, and that was a thing that I really enjoyed with, as we were talking about before we started here, my previous discussion with David Heim Smith, where he was kind of talking about some of the things going back into the history of dark ambient that he found interesting. So maybe if you'd like to tell us a little bit about some of your, ambient and dark ambient influences that led you in the direction that you've gone with your music.
Okay. Well, when I first started writing music in the 90s, my influences were more new age because that's how my music was. I was inspired by people like Suzanne Shawnee and Liz Story,
Hmm.
um, and Yanni and people like that. And so I wrote a lot of very melodic material. That material is on an album called the Lost Early Archives, I think is what it's called, and it's all material from like 1991 to 1997. Um, but then somebody sent me a cassette copy of a sleep concert by Robert Rich in 1996, I think it was, And I started listening to that, and I was like, "This is really cool. I want to try my hand at space ambient or ambient, whatever it's called."
Yeah.
And I've also listened to a lot of Steve Roach, Structures from Silence, The Magnificent Void, which is one of my favorite albums by him.
Mm.
Another one that I really like by him is Slow Heat. And so I wrote an album called Time's Escape, and that one has inspiration from everyone from Steve Roach to Robert Rich to Tangerine Dream, even Richard Bermer and Klaus Schulze. So it travels the ambient range pretty well. And some of the dark ambient artists that I first really noticed were people like Kamar Height and see who else. Well, Kamar Height's the big one that stands out to me as someone that I first heard because I listened to his I can't remember the name of the album. It was one of his really early
There was the
ones.
Star Wheel and Asleep and Well Hidden.
That that Star Wheel, I think
Yeah.
that's the one it was, and I was like, this is amazing. Because I used to do a radio show on the internet called The Blind Flight that went from 2008 till 2016,
Oh, that's cool.
and I used to feature a lot of dark ambient by a lot of different people, and I would even do live performances on there at some point. But yeah, so I don't know, dark ambient. There's so much of it out there, and now I just listen to a lot of different things, and
Yeah, well, yeah, so I mean, Camera Height is definitely one of my main favorites, and I and the things that he's branched out into over the last couple of years are really awesome too with his Hypnagoga Press label. So I'm definitely a huge fan of Paris. So
oh,
we're definitely in agreement there on that being some of our favorite dark ambients. Uh,
yeah, and Sparkspin is really good too.
yeah, I was gonna say you also mentioned him in that previous interview that you did with Rich. Um, yeah,
Yep.
and I've actually had the pleasure of meeting both of those guys now, so I can say there is kind of human beings as they are great dark ambient artists. Um,
Oh, okay.
and Coffee Thug, hey Michael, he says. And Ronnie Ringman says, been a bit since I managed to catch the stream, but hey, can't miss Scott Lawler. Absolutely, I agree. Thank you very much for being here. I haven't actually. I think this is my first stream of 2022. Actually, I things were crazy for the last couple of weeks of December. I said at the beginning of December that I was going. Well, I said to myself that I was going to cut back on the interviews, and
Uh huh.
instead I ended up doing like 2 to 3 interviews a week instead of one a week by the
Oh
end
wow.
of the year. And so by oh man, by the beginning of January I just needed a break. So I think
Yeah.
this is my first time back on camera since last year, but I just took a 2 week vacation, 2.5 3 week vacation for myself. It was necessary. uh
Absolutely.
and I'm back in 4K. So if any of you guys are able to watch in 4K and that's working, let me know because I haven't the slightest clue if it's actually working or not. So yeah, just to throw in a little of that uh whatever you want to call it, administrative comments there. um yeah, so then what sort of instruments do you know how to play in general, and which ones have you brought into your dark ambient into your music in general? I know I wouldn't say everything that you do falls into the dark ambient category.
Yeah. Um, I can play piano, and I played drums for a little while. I played drums in my band in the college band when I was in school, and I played drums, piano, and keyboards. And
Nice.
now a lot of my music is I use native instruments complete. So there's a lot of virtual instruments I use, different choirs, string libraries, um, drone. drone libraries and just a lot of different things, even some drums now and then.
Nice. Yeah. I think specifically knowing piano is incredibly useful for a musician in these sort of all these similar genres here that we're talking about today. Um,
Yeah, I took like a year. I took like a year of piano lessons in high school, and I didn't really learn scales or anything, but I learned how to play a lot of different different songs by a lot of different artists. And then my piano lessons were cut short, literally by an accident with a wood shop machine. I was taking wood shop, and I cut my hand on a joiner.
mm,
So I was out of commission for about 6 weeks. So I couldn't play any piano for a while.
yeah, that does not sound like fun.
No, I didn't even know I cut my hand until the teacher said, "Oh man, you're bleeding all over the place." I'm like, I had no idea.
Oh wow,
Um,
that's intense.
yeah, people are like, "What is it?" I remember my wife has said, "Why would they let a blind person take wood shop?" I'm like, "Well, because it's a really cool thing to do, and I built some pretty cool things in there. Built a record case, and I built a hat rack for a friend of mine, and even tried to build a xylophone. But it was really hard to tune the xylophone correctly with all the machinery going on. So the last note wasn't exactly in the correct pitch. So, but it was pretty interesting.
Oh man, yeah, that is definitely intense.
Yep.
Um, yeah, well, I'm thinking about I'm trying to find the name of it right now. It's eluding me at the moment, but I just watched this movie a couple of days ago that's kind of making me laugh about this. Oh yeah, Dancer in the Dark. Are you familiar with that from Lars von Trier? Um,
No,
it's
oh, I have
yeah,
not.
it's a film that Lars von Trier did back in around 2000, I think. That had Bjork as the
Okay.
main character, and in the story, Bjork she was like actively going blind as the movie progressed, and she worked at a heavy machinery factory, and all the people around her were sort of freaking out that she was trying to use the equipment while she was clearly blind, and so yeah, that kind of what you're saying about your wife being like, what, why did they let you into the shop class? It was kind of the same thing in that movie where they're like, you got to stop doing this, and she's like, no, I'm good.
Yep. Exactly. I've never seen that movie. I'll have to check it
Yeah,
out.
yeah, it's good. Yeah, and Bjork is awesome, so that was cool. So do you still play any drums?
Um, Only on the keyboard. I've got Damage from Heaviosity that I use once in a while, but actually I haven't played a real drum set in quite a long time.
Yeah, that's I guess that's something that you would probably want to stay on top of. I guess after the years start to go by, I think it probably becomes a lot harder to keep playing drums. Um,
Yeah, it's either use it or
yeah,
lose it.
yeah, exactly. So do you do any sort of field recordings of your own in your music?
Well, I don't do my own field recordings because I don't get out of the house that
Yeah.
much. Because there isn't really anywhere to go too much around here, and there's not a whole lot happening outside anywhere these
Mm,
days.
yeah.
But a lot of my field recordings, they come from some VST instruments like Bioscape and Geosonics from Sonic Couture and things like that. So
Interesting.
yeah, there are field recordings, but they come from different software developers.
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to get some of my own field recordings for years now, and growing and living in the Baltimore, Washington metro area, it's just about impossible to do anything that doesn't have a plane. Like planes fly over top of me every 3.5 minutes. There's
Yeah,
no way around it. So it it's really frustrating.
yeah, we don't get a lot of planes, but it's just pretty quiet over here because our neighborhood, we're in a pretty like a bedroom community, so there's not a whole lot going on. We're more in the suburbs out here. We're about maybe 30 minutes north of Dallas.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yep.
Um, yeah, well, that's nice that you don't have to worry about the noise there at least because there's constant noises here. Um,
Yeah.
so what sort of different? I know you've done some collaborative albums. What have been some of your more interesting collaborations that you've done over the years?
One of my most interesting collaborations was with Eliza Hyde. I think that album is called. Gosh, I'm not in front of my computer right now. The art of what's it called? Fractals of Nature, I think is what it's called, or something like that.
Mm,
Um, and she's actually just sent me a piece to that I'm doing with some other artists now, and so I'll be having that album come out in February. She adds a very unique voice to the things that I sent her, which is really good. And I've done some collaborations with Insectarium. We've done a couple of collaborations together,
nice.
and I've collaborated with a lot of different people: Wings of an Angel, Metadronos, Sevenism, Jack Hertz. I did a couple of collaborations with Drunny Darko back way back, probably about 2013 or 2014.
Nice. Yeah, I think
The
I
one
think I
album,
remember that actually.
yeah, the one album on Bandcamp that I did with him is it's called Polar Night on Titan.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I do. I remember hearing that. Yeah, that's been a while since I heard that one.
Yeah, that one's really old.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
it doesn't feel like it, but yep, it's getting 2013 is getting further and further away from us.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so Ronnie Ringman says most of my field recordings are done in my basement these days, the most organic place around here during the pandemic. Yep, I can see that. And
Oh, okay.
Insectarium says, "Yes, you are awesome to work with." So that is really cool.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Um, and yeah, so what are some of the different labels that you've worked with? And I know like Petroglyph and Aural Films. If you want to talk a little bit about some of those labels or other ones that you've worked on and things that you like about them.
When I first started releasing, or when I first started with music back in 2013, I started out by submitting music to different labels. My first one was We're All Ghosts, and then I started submitting tracks to different compilations on different labels. And that's one thing that I usually suggest whenever people ask me, "Do you have any suggestions on how to get started in ambient?" I always say, start sending your stuff to compilations. That's one way to really get your name out there and get some exposure without having to try to create your own audience from the ground up.
Yeah, that's a really good
And
advice.
so I've worked a lot with Aural Films. Jack Hertz and I have done several collaborations on the label. My newest collaboration with with um, well, there's this new collaboration I've got on the label called Dark Matter that came out a couple of weeks ago. But I've also done some work with Jeff Small and his earthMantra label, and those are the two big labels that I'm really actively still working with. Most of my stuff I just do on my own label, on my own Bandcamp page. But I really enjoy working with those two labels. Jack and Jeff are really top notch in the ambient community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've been following Jack's Aural Films for a while, and yeah, there's some really good stuff over there.
Yep,
Um, you were talking about the Dark Matter album. I was actually going to ask you about that. The Julian Lacroix, um,
yep.
who, if I don't know if I am so terrible with French. Like, I just want to take a French class just so I can pronounce words correctly because I am at a total loss. But I think it's Julian
Yeah.
Lacroix. So there you go. If I'm wrong, sorry. But that I have really been enjoying that album for one, and I don't know if you've been following what Julian's been doing in the last couple of months with his new sort of oriental dark ambient music. Have you been following that?
I haven't followed that a whole lot. I'm more familiar with his music under Knowledge Conspiracy. That's on the Eighth Tower label.
Y- I didn't know that that was the same guy.
Uh huh. Yep, that's the same dude.
That's awesome. Okay. So yeah, I actually
But he's retired that moniker now.
yeah, well that was a really nice project. So yeah,
Yeah,
all right. Well, all right. So I knew about him for longer than I thought.
cool.
Yeah, no, I cuz I remember yeah, years ago hearing some of his albums over there on Reverse Alignment, you said, right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's where I heard it was Reverse Alignment. Um, but yeah, he started a he did a project called Ungaiko, I think. Again, I'm sorry, I don't speak Japanese either, and I'm terrible at pronouncing Japanese as well. So I think the project was called Ungaiko, and he did an album, Old Tales, on Noctivagant label. And then he took the name of that project, and after that album released, he named the label after that, Ungaiko Productions. And it's all like different artists that are doing like this Japanese inspired dark ambient and dungeon synth music, and I am really loving it.
I'll have to send him an email and ask him to send me that link so I can check that out. He probably sent it to me a little while ago, and I may have looked at it once. But I get so much email, sometimes I just lose track of
I know,
things.
you and me both.
Yeah,
It's a constant assault of like there's so many places to get emails and messages to. Like I have two different email addresses, and I have two different Facebook pages, and I have Instagram and Twitter and Twitch and YouTube, and like oh my god, it's like every time I open anything I'm like answering messages.
yeah. If I had more than one email address, I'd probably go catatonic.
Yeah.
It's hard enough for me to keep up with one.
Yeah, I should have streamlined things years ago, but what I'm doing just sort of slowly manifested itself, and I didn't realize at the time how how important it is to get all of your interactions to happen, professional interactions to happen in one place. So now I just have conversations across multiple platforms.
You know, what's always been amazing to me is some of these ambient artists who have multiple monikers. Like take Bing Satellites, for instance. I mean, he's under that name. He's under the Lovely Moon, the Ambient Drones of Bill Baxter. He's got like 7 or 8 different things, and I'm like, how the hell do you keep all that straight? There's no way I could do anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel
I
the
mean,
same way.
some of these guys do that, and I'm like, how do you keep it all straight in your head?
Yeah, it has to be hard. So,
Yeah.
you've been recently been doing a series of releases. The what is it? The New Beginnings and Reflections.
Oh yeah, those albums. Those come out annually. I started in 2019, and I just decided that I'm going to do this really cool drone series and put the album out at January 1st of each year.
Nice.
And so I've done that, and I just wrapped up the Isolation concert series the other day.
Yes, that was the other one I was going to mention. So, yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about what you were doing with that series?
Back in 2020, um, I was hearing a lot of people perform on YouTube, like Kamar Heat and Martin
Mm-hmm.
Sturzer
Aphelios.
and all these other people. Yep, Ophelius. And I was really inspired by what they were doing on YouTube. And I was like, you know, I should try to do something like this because I like to play music and I've never played streamed live before. So I got open broadcast software and learned how to do it. And it was so much easier to do that now. But I didn't have a webcam because back in April of last year, or 2 years ago, all the webcams were gone because everybody used them for Zoom meetings and everything. So I just didn't have one. And that didn't bother people because people were like, well, I listen to your music with my eyes shut anyway. And so I think it was April 1st of 2020, I did my first live stream. And over the last couple of years, I've just released all those performances in different volumes of the Isolation concert series.
Nice.
And yeah, it's it's been a really fun experience to play live in that way. But I just felt after that many volumes, it's time to bring that series to a conclusion.
Yeah, and so a thing I was just thinking here, you said you were inspired by Robert Rich's sleep albums, which I am also. I really, really love the sleep music that Robert Rich did. I was actually looking for one last night, but they weren't on Spotify, and that's usually what I put on while I'm sleeping and listening to music because YouTube inevitably will play a commercial at double volume while I'm 3 hours into sleep and I jump up in my bed like, oh my god, stupid YouTube. So
Yeah,
the I end up sticking with the demon of Spotify because I know that it's not going to interrupt me with commercials because, well, I give them money.
yeah. Well, the Robert Rich sleep concerts, those are probably too long for Spotify too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess if they can separate them out into tracks. I think that's how it is on Bandcamp. Like they have to be in like 1 hour snippets. Um, have you ever thought about
Yeah,
doing anything like
it
that?
depends. Well, I have one album on Bandcamp that's an 8-hour album called "A Blanket of Light in the Night," which was from a long form performance that I did on YouTube, or I should say streamed on YouTube because I prepared the music ahead of time in Complete and Reaper. The other album I have that's pretty long is one of the first albums I uploaded to Bandcamp called Journey to the Boots Void. That's a 5-hour album, and that album is created from just shortwave radio transmissions.
Oh, nice.
So no keyboards were used on that album. And I've been working on a sequel to it ever since shortly after I put that album out, but I just haven't finished it yet. And that's been like 7 or 8 years ago. I don't know when I'm going to finish that album, but it's something I think every year that I'll finish it and release it, and it's still not done because I get distracted by other projects.
Yeah. Well, I was saying this to somebody the other day in private. It there's not really an immediacy with this sort of genre and community. People aren't doing music doesn't happen in trends here where something that was interesting back in the 90s is still interesting right now, something that happened in 2010 is
Mm-hmm.
still interesting right now. So if you put the album off to the side for 2 or 3 more years and then pick it back up, whenever it's done is the perfect time to release it. It's not like you're going to say, oh, I missed the trend.
That's right. That yeah, because there is no
Yeah,
trend out here.
that's a very, in metal music, hip hop, pop, any of these different sort of genres, there's always an immediacy that if you don't stay on the trend and if you don't get your album out while the trend is still hot, that you might as well just throw the thing away and start over again.
Yeah,
So that's definitely a boon that we have in this community that um, everything feels very much timeless.
yeah, and that's a distinct advantage that we have over other artists in the more commercial aspect of the industry.
Yeah, and you can come to an album whenever it's time to come to it. We hear
Hmm.
things from the '80s as far as ambient goes, and they sound like things happening today. Whereas
Yep.
you listen to some sort of pop music from the '80s, and it's like that sounds like it's '80s as hell.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it certainly is '80s.
Yep.
Let's see. Insectarium says Steve Roach Immersion series. He listens to that every night there. That's cool. And he also said, and album can be different, and no one cares. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Another
go ahead.
another good album by Steve Roach. Speaking of immersion series, is the Dream Circle,
Mm.
and that's probably in that same category. So that might be another one to check out.
Yeah, you guys are giving me good fodder for future sleep music, cuz
Yep.
yeah, I really I'm very picky with my sleep music. On one level, it has to be, subtle enough that it doesn't wake me up because I'm a light sleeper. And then also
Yeah.
on top of that, some certain frequencies that I keep going all night will guarantee that I wake up with a headache in the morning.
Hmm. Well, Kamar had started out music because he was having insomnia, and he was writing stuff to help him sleep, and then he decided to release it. Isn't that how he began in music?
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's the exact story. So yeah, I mean that's really cool. And to a certain extent that's what I'm trying to do myself here, but as I said, it's what I have in my head is very, very field recordings dependent, and
Hmm.
I have not got the proper field recordings to take it to the next level yet. So maybe I'll take a trip to Svalbard one day up in northern Norway, and I'll finally get those beautiful field recordings that I'm looking for.
Me and my wife went to Hong Kong in 2018 for about a week because her company was thinking of having her relocate over there for a year for this project that they were, because she was working for Hitachi at the time. And Hong Kong was very loud, and it was very humid, and it was very fast moving. People would say that Hong Kong is like New York on
Oh
steroids.
wow, yeah,
There's a lot of interesting sounds over there.
yeah, I could imagine. Um, yeah, an album that I've actually been listening to a lot recently is what Carl Michael von Hauswolf's The Wind in Kirtipur, which basically him and a couple of friends went to Nepal on vacation, and he just like recorded like 45 minutes of just the sounds of a particular square in Kathmandu. And it's really cool to sit here and just read a book and feel like you're sitting in some ancient Nepali town reading.
Oh, cool! I have not heard of that album. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. It's there's a new Eratatox Decodings is the label. Chandra Shukla runs the label.
If you think about that, can you message that to me on Facebook or something? Because I'm terrible with remembering spelling and all
Yeah,
that.
sure, no problem.
Thanks.
Um yeah, so yeah, I'm constantly, looking for things to put on at night and things to put on in the background. And there's that's the other thing with this sort of genre of music. There's so many niches within it where it's like, oh, this is the sleep music, this is the field recordings of a town, this is the field recordings of wind, and like, like the frozen ambient and the sci-fi ambient and the futuristic ambient and the ritualistic ambient. It's like there's so many different directions to take, and within each one of these, like we were saying before, it's very timeless even within that branch.
Hmm.
Where things there's new innovations, but they really sort of keep following the same way of doing it for many years. So
Yeah.
um yeah, I'm gonna have to give your A Blanket of White in the Night a listen. That's I think I'm gonna put that one on tonight
Oh, cool.
because that sounds really awesome.
I'll send you send you a copy of that.
Oh, okay. Well, that's cool. Um,
Yeah.
let's see. Desideri Marginus just said, I went to a sleeping bag concert with Carl Michael von Hauswolf once. Really good. Nice. Sleeping bag concert. So that's sort of like a sleep, I guess like a sleep ambient concert. That sounds really badass. Um, yeah, I've been digging his music a lot lately. So I'm glad to. There's so many things. That's what I was telling David Hyam Smith. Like, I got into the genre in like 2015, and I've been spending all of my time and energy on focusing on what's happening in the moment. And it's there's so many things that happened before I discovered the genre that I need to move in reverse back into history and sort of rediscover all of these things. And
My
Desideri Marginez says, yeah, the audience brought their own sleeping bags and the concert went for 8 hours. Hell yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that'd be like a Robert Rich concert too.
Yes,
Yeah,
that
his
sounds
concerts go for
great.
about that long.
Yeah, sorry, were you about to say something there? I cut you off a minute ago.
No, I was just going to say that my first introduction to like, well, new age, which then led to ambient, was musical star streams back in the '80s when I first heard Tangerine Dream. And before that, I was into like heavy metal,
Hmm,
like Slayer and stuff like that.
nice.
But I started listening to Tangerine Dream, and I got their the first five albums of theirs, and Zeit from 1972 is probably one of my favorite albums. I don't know if you've heard that or not,
I have not.
but that is an album that is pretty cool. It might be a little hard to sleep to because it's a little creepy, but it's still a really good album.
Well, I'm totally cool with sleeping to creepy stuff. as long as
Yeah,
long as
then
it doesn't wake me up, I don't mind. If it draws me into a nightmare, that could be fun.
yeah, Zeit could be almost on nightmare territory depending on some things,
Yeah,
but it's a really good album.
nice. Yeah, yeah, that's cool. I'll have to check that out. Yeah, there's so many awesome things to hear. What sort of what is your DAW of choice?
I use Reaper.
Reaper, nice. Yeah, I am
Hmm.
aware of it, but I haven't messed with that one personally.
Before I used Reaper, when I was using hardware with the Roland from like 2013 to 2020, I was doing all my recording in SoundForge,
Mm,
and um, every once in a while I would use Audacity, and I would get it. I got into like the whole using Paul Stretch for a little while near the beginning of my music, but the problem with Paul Stretch is you can tell when something is run through that utility. It has a very distinct sonic characteristic to it, probably because these people would put these 8 hour versions of Paul Stretched 3 minute pop songs on YouTube. Um, but eventually I got away from all that. But when I got Complete and Reaper, it's just opened up a whole world of possibilities for me because, it talks. So as a blind person, I can access so many more parameters and so many more sounds than I ever could have with the old hardware.
yeah, that's such an interesting thing. I had no idea that you were blind until like a week or two ago.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's I guess it's just not a thing that is. I guess it's. I'm sure it's very important to you, but as a listener of your music, it's not really of importance. I suppose you should enjoy the
Well, and
music one way or another.
well, yeah, nobody would know anyway because it's not evident in the music. But I'm sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead. You were
well,
going to
no,
say.
I thought like after because I was talking to somebody and they're like, "Is he blind?" And I was like, "I have no idea. I don't think so." And I was like, and then I looked at some more things that she said, and I was like, "Oh well, I guess he is." I had never
Yep.
noticed that, but then yeah, then I started thinking like that must be such an interesting world of working with the software. I mean, I feel like it's impossible for me to learn the software, and it's like it seems like they must do a lot, with like you said, with the voices and everything. That's so cool that you're able to put together so much music without feeling a hindrance, and that's really badass.
Well, the one thing that is probably more of a disadvantage using all this software is that I've got literally hundreds of thousands of sounds. So sometimes it takes me longer to find the sound that I want than it does for me to do the improvisation or the composition that I've got in my head.
Hmm.
And being someone who is not, it's not always the easiest for me to make decisions. That can be a little bit of a roadblock sometimes. I'll spend like an hour looking for a sound, and then I'm like, okay, so what was I going to do with this? Now the inspiration's gone because I spent all this time looking for this one sound, and I can drill down into categories, but that still leaves an an unimaginable amount of possibilities.
Yeah,
But this it seems to work out though. Okay.
yeah, that's awesome. And so you were I think I read in the interview that you did with Rich that for the most part you used your analog synth for pretty much everything for a couple of years, and then you greatly branched out beyond that.
Yeah, because after using the Roland for like 6 years, and it served me really well. It created a lot of albums, helped me create a lot of music. But I got to the point where I wasn't inspired by the sounds on it anymore.
Yeah, I could definitely
So
see that being the case.
I mean, it had like 2,000 sounds, and that sounds like a lot, and it really is when you consider back in the 70s and 80s, you had these synthesizers that didn't have any sounds. You had to build your own sounds,
Yeah.
and that's one aspect of the the technology that I don't have any patience with, sound design. Um, I'm not very good at imagining a sound in my head and then making that sound a reality. That takes a whole different sort of skill set that I just am not wired to possess.
Yeah, I could see that
But
being the case.
yeah, then I decided to just get complete and branch out in the sounds and everything else, and so that's what I did, and it's worked out pretty well. Although I'm gonna have to upgrade my computer soon because it sometimes has a hard time keeping up with the big projects that have 30 or 40 tracks because it'll start buffering when I'm playing and I got to reboot and then it'll be okay. So that tells me it's just a RAM issue.
Yeah, yeah. I I was running on 6 gigs of RAM for a long time, and then I built a new PC about 2 years ago, and I put 16 gigs in it, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna last me forever with 16 gigs. And then not like then I started doing video editing for this channel because back then I didn't do any of this stuff with the video, and now that I'm doing that, then I realized if you're editing 1080 or especially now 4K video, you need a lot of RAM. So then I doubled it again. Now I'm up to 32, and I probably still am going to end up having to double it again up to 64 before too long.
Yeah, for my new computer, I want to get 64.
Yeah, that's what my brother
Uh,
has is 64. So I think once you get up there, you probably will be okay for a few more years, but yeah, it's you know.
yeah, at that point, doubling from 64 to 128 is not going to double your performance. So there's a there's a there's diminishing returns on the RAM. I think the higher up you go.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to music, I don't think there's going to be that many, you know, new creations musically speaking that are going to require such massive amounts of RAM. Whereas, when it comes to video, like the difference between 720 and 4K is massive.
Yeah. Well, the only thing with music is if you're doing things with a lot of big orchestral libraries that have like a trillion mic positions for the instruments and all
Yeah,
that,
true.
that kind of stuff will take up a lot of RAM. But I don't do a lot of that kind of thing. My wife used to say, she used to say, you just put a brick on your keyboard and let it play for an hour, and then you got your next release. And that's what we were talking about earlier with some of these other some of these other guys who have like 7,000 albums on Bandcamp.
Yeah, and and not to like call anybody out, or everybody does things in their own way, but
Oh,
I
absolutely.
think it's really weird. Like somebody told me that they came up with an algorithm that just makes music for them. Like they just plug a couple different things in, and then some software takes over and like bam, boom, here's my album, and I'm just like, I'm not impressed. Like, that's impressive from a coding perspective, but it's not very impressive from a musical perspective.
There are some tracks that I've recorded where I've used Reactor. Are you familiar with Reactor?
No.
Reactor is a synthesizer that you can use in native instruments. You can probably use it in other uh, frameworks as well. But some of the modules in Reactor are self-generating. So like Space Drone,
Mm.
you just click a patch and it'll just play forever.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And
And I mean, if you want to do that for an album or two here or there, like, whatever. I mean, experiment with things. But I just think to like build a career off of releasing albums that really didn't have any input of your own is just kind of strange.
well, sometimes what I'll do just to play around with the idea is I'll use some things from like Reactor's Space Drone or Metaphysical Function or Screewell, but I don't just choose random patches. I'll choose these self-generating patches that actually sound good together when they're layered appropriately, and I'll use that as the basis of something, and then I'll go back later and do more improvising and stuff over the top of it. So there's still a lot of intentionality in those experiments, but they just start out being more self-generating because of Reactor, but I still add more things to them.
Yeah,
So it's a combination of the whole um whatever was
yeah,
coding and human intentionality. So it's like a hybrid kind of thing going on there.
yeah. So, do you think after our whole humanity messes over, you're gonna want to be doing more live performances, or are you more happy to be a studio musician?
Well, I've never. Yeah, I'm more happy being a studio musician, and to unpack all this gear and tote it out to a live performance would be a really big problem because of just the way we've got everything situated in my living room over here.
Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare to me.
Oh yeah, I mean it took Cindy hours to get all those cords and everything hooked up just the right way so that there aren't cords dangling all over the place and everything. And I wouldn't want to put anyone through redoing all that just because I wanted to play live out somewhere.
Yeah, you almost have to have like a second full setup to do that.
Yeah, and to do that would be a little expensive. I'd have to get a
Mm.
new laptop and a smaller keyboard, and that would be hard because I'm so used to playing on 88 keys because coming from piano, that's what you have.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's
And
cool. So you got a full size keyboard that you work with.
oh
That's
yeah,
cool.
so
Yeah,
I use the whole range of that thing.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, that makes sense. Um,
Yeah.
but I think like you were saying with Pear's music and Martin Sturzer and what you're doing, I think we've seen that there's a lot of room for ambient, dark ambient, drone, whatever kinds of music in live streams and just recording and then uploading it to YouTube, or recording it and then putting it up on your Bandcamp. I think there's a lot that can be done with that, where people can sit in their own home in the their own comforts and enjoy the music still along with other people. I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, and I'm trying to be more intentional with my YouTube channel now by trying to add more content. And I do these longer live, well, they're not really live because I prepare all the music ahead of time, but I stream it on YouTube. But while I'm streaming it, I'm interactive in the chat room.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've done a lot of those over the last 8 or 9 months. And I might release some of those later this year. I want to remaster them first, which that takes a while to remaster stuff that's that long.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, but I might probably still do some more of those, but I just haven't had the inspiration to come up with anything new for right now. But that'll pass. More inspiration will come, and I'll have something else out.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, yeah, let's see. Ronnie Ringman says CPU is the key. as well. Speaking of experience, since I'm working on a very old machine here, whenever I go beyond 32 channels, I have to re-record everything.
Oh man, that's a pain.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's gotta suck. But I do know where I do know what he means, because when I was working with my 6 gig RAM and my really even worse CPU, because on my old PC I it's really easy to upgrade your RAM and your hard drives and your video cards, but it's not as
Mhm.
easy to upgrade your CPU because you got to sort of rip that thing off of the motherboard. It's not really as accessible as everything else is. So everything in my PC was upgraded except for my CPU. So when when sometime I did a sleep mix that I put up on Mixcloud, and that's
Uh-huh.
what I was having to do. Like after I put like 8 to 10 songs together, then I had to mix that all down into one track. Then I'd add like 8 to 10 more songs. Then I'd mix that all down into one track, and I just had to keep doing that over and over again the whole way down the line until I got up to 8 hours of just, mixed music. That was basically all. Like I just had to keep dropping it all into a single track, or my computer would just, once I had like 12 tracks open, it would just come to a screeching halt.
Oh wow, you can upload 8 hours of continuous material on Mixcloud at
Yeah,
once.
yeah,
Oh, that's pretty cool.
yeah. I don't know what the limit
Um,
is, but I probably was coming. I don't think there's a time limit on Mixcloud. There's a size limit. So I had to I like to upload things in 320 kilobits per second on Mixcloud usually,
mhm.
but for that sleep mix, I think I had to drop it down to like 128. Like it was a pretty bad quality.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, I had to make a bit of a sacrifice on the file quality, but yeah, I did manage to keep the 8 hour length.
It's really amazing how far we've come with technology. Because like my first computer back in 1992 was a it had 2 meg of RAM, a 60 meg hard drive, and DOS 5.0.
Oh my
So,
god. Yep.
I couldn't even record a single note with that thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, I've been lucky that I've grown up with computers. I remember like playing Ninja Turtles video games on a floppy disk that I had to, I'm like 7 years old and I'm in DOS like typing in like C:\\run.exe.
Yep,
Or
yep,
whatever. That's not that's not right, but you know what I mean. And
yep.
then I would load up my Ninja Turtles video game and play it on this old, ancient computer. So yeah, Ronnie says I did my first albums in DOS. That's awesome.
The other thing that I really liked back in the day was mod files. Do you remember those?
I don't.
Mod files. They were made on the Amiga, I believe it was, but you could play them on like old DOS machines, and they were like multi-track files, and they were more electronica, but they were really cool.
Hmm.
Oh, yep, mod files. If you do a Google search for, 'em, I'm sure you can find a ton of archives on them, they'll play like in Winamp and stuff like that on your Windows 10 machine.
Yeah, Ronnie says I
Um,
still mod Zone Amiga.
yep,
It's awesome.
yep,
Yeah, I'll have to look into
mod
that. I'm not
files
familiar with that.
and BBSs and modems and all that.
Nice. That's too cool.
It's like old school, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all right. Well, I think I guess we'll go ahead and wrap things up here. I
Okay.
really appreciate your time today, Scott. And
Well, I
it's
appreciate you having me on the program. Thank you.
yeah, it's been a lot of fun having a conversation here with you today. And I also really appreciate everybody that's hanging out with us in chat today and got in on the conversation as well. So
Yeah, thanks for hanging out, guys.
yeah, so I'm gonna check out these albums that you were mentioning here today, and we will stay in touch. And for everybody in chat, again, thank you guys all for being here, and I will see you all again soon. So yeah, peace and have a wonderful weekend, everybody.